Good morning, Econ. Welcome back to the classroom for the day. We are working on aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And I thought it'd probably be smart to start with a review of the basics, a review of the homework before we try this AD/AS curve quiz. Okay. So it's early in the morning. Pardon me if I look a little sleepy, but I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. So we'll get started. What we're looking at here basically is your cheat sheet. Let me turn off the spotlighter. It's just basically where we left off with everything we talked about last class on one page. And I think it's going to be helpful for you basically to use on your quiz today. So all quizzes are open note, open book. So no worries having this out, okay? I do want to highlight a few key parts of it though. If you use this, guys, it'll take a lot of guesswork out of your page today or out of your quiz today. So let's just start where we left off last time. Number one, I'm going to focus on the price level. Guys, that basically is a measure of all the prices averaged in together that you could look at in the economy, whether it's gas, whether it's consumption, whether it's, steel for construction. All of those prices are averaged out, and what we get is an index. That index measures inflation. And as inflation rises and falls, then what you see is that your dollar is going to stretch a little farther. That's why the AD curve, which is the total spending that we have in the economy, is shaped the way that it is, right? AD is a measure of consumption, investment, and government spending. So it's literally everybody spending in one curve, right? These are not individual products, individual prices or quantities. This simply represents everything that's going on in the economy in terms of aggregate demand, okay? When you look at the other end of the spectrum here, we have real GDP, output, and employment. We're talking about literally a measure of everything that's being produced, and it's going to change with the level of the inflation level. So it's also by default a measure of employment. We can use this data to figure out how many people might be working or how many people might not be working. So it really is the entire economy in one picture. The AS curve, that is everything that can be supplied to the economy, and it has this funky three-pronged shape here. It's not a straight line because essentially we can have periods of that curve, which are kind of like recession, where output is not very strong and there are a lot of people standing around with nothing to do. Range one, this flat range, is all about unemployment. Range three, way up here, are levels of high inflation. No matter how high you raise the prices, the economy just can't go any farther than this. Because there's limits to what our capacity will allow, right? You can produce, but higher prices are not going to be an incentive at that point. So our happy place is right here in the middle, okay? That's where you have a mixture of a little unemployment, a little inflation, but not so much so that it throws the entire economy off. And wherever AS and AD intersect, that's the current level for the price level where you see one, and real GDP where you see one. So this is typically where your curves begin on your homework. Decreases always go to the left. So if you take the AD curve, then you just grab it and shift it backwards to the left. AS curves, if they're going to decrease, guys, we're going to shift them diagonally up the AD curve. So still, mechanics are the same. Decreases always go to the left. Increases are always going to go to the right. So you can kind of see some things that are there to help guide you. No up and down today, and that will screw you up. So we don't want to do that at all. Okay. Up at the top, I've given you all the reasons. Think of this like Trendy Pets or Pioneer. And what you can see is that this is a little easier to remember. For AD, there's only three reasons, right? You can either have like a consumption increase, an investment increase, or a government increase. And any one of those is enough to say that we're going to have an increase in aggregate demand. That would mean that the curve would need to move forward, right? So the idea basically is that if I switch any one of those arrows down, then I'm going to have to do the same thing for the AD curve. Just realize this can go both directions, okay? For AS, it's a little bit harder to understand because the abbreviations are not quite as clear cut. While C, I, and G are all spending, and that shows up as AD, these require a little bit more thought. So the L there that you're seeing, that is the legal environment. That's a measure of how many laws are on the books and what kind of regulation our companies have to face. Obviously, the more regulations they have to jump over, think of it like hurdles in a track race. It's more challenging to get through that. So deregulation removes those hurdles, right? So if you see anything in your prompts today that regard regulation or laws or things that businesses are having to do, you're probably talking about that first letter there. Resource costs, that is exactly like the supply that we talked about last time. That is anything you use to make what you're providing to the economy. So that could be oil, that could be gas, that could be materials, that could be labor. So any number of things there. Productivity is how resourceful we are as American workers, whether we're using technology to make more stuff available to the economy, or we're just getting better at our jobs because of better training. So productivity, think of that as the human component of all of this, what humans are able to do in the economy. And you can kind of see these all affect AS, or aggregate supply. Now, less regulation means more supply. Lower resource costs means more supply. Higher productivity pushes the curve forward. So you can kind of see, if I flip these around, we have the other situation. Okay. So just keep that cheat sheet with you. It's supposed to take the guesswork out of this today for you. So I hope that will be helpful. Let's take a quick look at the homework. Okay. You guys were doing this as Google Slides. I've already seen some of you put some things in. What I'm seeing looks good. I really did not intend for this to take an enormous amount of time. So I'm hoping that the fact that I'm already seeing people turn these in is that this is a little bit easier to do than what we were first thinking. But I'm learning along with you guys. I will be working on this with you. If I need to break these things down into smaller assignments, I can definitely do that. So you'll see some changes that I've made in chapter 13 as we go forward. All right. Aggregate demand, looking just at the curve first, right? You guys are starting on the middle curve C, and you are having to say, do we go forward or do we shift backwards, depending on what you see in the prompt. I should have probably prompted you guys that there's no change on this page. So let's take a look at these together. I think the first one I did for you in the homework, if Congress cuts taxes, then that's going to mean more consumption, right? Consumers are the ones who spend that, not government. Congress cuts taxes for the middle class. I think I've already said before, too, if I use that word taxes, if I use the word taxes, then you can see right here, that's going to be income taxes that we're typically talking about, right? I would have to expressly say corporate business taxes or something to that effect so that you would know we're not talking about income taxes. Okay, so just go ahead and feel free to make that assumption. For number two, okay, so what does that mean for the blanks? That means increase goes in the blank for AD, and that means we start on curve D, okay? So you hang on to that curve because that's where we start the next one. Survey shows business investment spending decreased last month. That would be the I in our model. If that's gonna go down, then we have to make AD decrease, and that means we're back on curve C, okay? Government spending to increase next fiscal year. President promises no increase in taxes. Government spending will increase. Therefore, my G is pointing upward, right? That means on your cheat sheet, if you look back here, then you should be able to see the same thing, right? So do go back and forth here. I'll try to model that for you as we go through, okay? For number four, survey shows consumers are confident about the future economy. That affects levels of spending and consumption. So that is an increase. To review, I think we've got here, guys, double check me. That's D. That goes C. That goes D. Now we're on E, right? Okay, so down to number five, business leaders feel economy is headed for recession. That's a dead giveaway. That's going to be a decrease. That's going to move us back to D. Stock market collapses, investors lose billions. We're going through that right now. Decrease AD. I think that puts us back on curve C. Productivity rises for the fourth straight year. Now, this was the no change. And what you have here basically is something that would be on the AS curve. It's fantastic for the economy, but you just can't show it on AD. So we say no change for AD and we stay right where we are. The last one, president cuts defense spending by 20%, no increase in domestic spending. That cut is going to show up on the AD curve, so we will decrease our curve and I think move back to B if I've kept track of everything. All right, moving on to the supply curve. You can see the diagonal shift I was talking about before. It's just a parallel shape in front of or behind the other. Um, so it's fairly simple. It does the same kind of thing. Now, these are probably a little more challenging because, again, you're having to think like a seller. On number one, it says unions grow more aggressive, wage rates increase. Well, that means that labor costs are rising, and any increase in resource costs is not going to shift forward. It's going to shift everything backward. So this first one, AS, is a decrease. We go back to curve B. OPEC successfully increases oil prices. That's not good. That's rising costs again. So AS decreases again. We go back to curve A. For number three, labor productivity. Here it is. Labor productivity increases dramatically. That's going to shift the curve forward. And we're going to go to curve B. Number four, giant natural gas discovery decreases energy prices. That means that we're going to have a fall in resource costs. And that means that the curve shifts forward again. Okay, so you need to do better. You guys, I know this stuff and I'm going through it so quickly. Every single time you see a prompt, to go back to this and think if you can see if you can figure it out. So let's try that. Okay. Giant natural gas discovery decreases energy prices. So I would look at this. I would say, oh, okay. So if they're decreasing natural gas prices, then that's going to show up as a decreased resource cost. Therefore, I can have an increase in AS, right? So that's going to shift our curve forward. Computer technology brings new efficiency to the industry. Let's click back here. There's productivity. There's aggregate supply. Our answer should be increase, and I've lost track of which curve that we're on. All right, let's go back here. B, A, back to B, back to C, right? So computer technology brings new efficiency. That should go to curve D. Government spending increases. This is a tricky one. This one is basically a no change because government spending is on the other curve. So just stay right where you are. Cuts in tax rates increase incentives to save. That's talking about what consumers are doing. That's on the AD curve. So both 6 and 7 are no change. Number 8, low birth rate to decrease labor force in the future. Okay, so that could affect you a couple of different ways. You could say that because we're going to have fewer people in the future, labor costs are going to rise. Or you could say that the American workforce, by and large, becomes less productive because there's fewer people to go around. I don't know how you want to look at that. They should both get you the same answer. That is going to be a decrease, right? Research shows that improved schools have increased the skills of American workers and managers. That's going to be an increase. So let's see here. Where were we? I think that was C, right? Ooh, let's see here. Yeah, I think that left us C. So then we stayed the same. We went B, and I think we went back to C. Guys, I may have gotten off a little bit there on my letters, but I think now you know at least increase, decrease, and you can follow that through. Okay. All right. I'm going to shift gears, I think, now for looking at this PDF. So sit tight for just a second. Let me pull up the actual Google Slides, and we will be right back. All right, guys, I'm back. I've pulled up the assignment now, and I think we're ready to go through this, but let's start by taking a look. I'm going to need to get my face out of the way so that we have more room to see the screen, but I am still here, okay? I'm hoping that I reminded you guys you need to start with your drawing here over on the right-hand side after you've read the prompt. If you try to work left to right on this thing, it's going to confuse the heck out of you, okay? So what you're going to need to do is focus on the prompt and then drawing your answer first, okay? If I read this thing, Congress passes a tax cut for the middle class and the president signs it. I'm assuming that's going to be more consumption. Therefore, let's take a look. More consumption, more AD. Now I'm ready to draw my curve in the forward position, okay? So hold up. Let me do that for you just real quick. I'm just going to annotate this super fast, okay? And now you know the answer to that. You need to go in and label everything. I won't take time to do that in this homework review, but at least you know now which curve we're looking for, okay? Here during a recession, now remember, recessions, that's range 1. So that's why you started so low here. If we find the government decreases, are actually increases spending on schools, highways, and other public works. We now know they're trying to bring AD back up into range 2. So that means I can take a line and put my answer somewhere in here. Okay. For new oil discoveries causing, oops, sorry. There we are. Let's see. I don't want to jump to that page. I'm still on this page. Sorry. Navigation is challenging with all of these windows. New oil discoveries cause large decreases in energy prices. That's going to be cheaper resource costs, right? So if I look back here, I can see lower resource costs, higher AS. Therefore, I'm going to come to this thing and draw a curve in front of it. Okay, let me get rid of my pointer. I can take my lines here and go real fast. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so now I know curve is going to shift forward. Sorry for the crazy line there. Okay, got the idea. Moving ahead. Okay, this one probably threw you for a loop. Demand pull inflation. We're going to talk about that today. Demand pull inflation is where AD is like overpowering what the rest of the economy can do. It usually happens during wartime when you have government wanting military goods and everything for a war effort, but you have the other economy like the consumers and businesses that still need stuff too. So this kind of clue about inflation tells me I need to be somewhere in range 3. So let's just take a line and throw that in there for aggregate supply. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. If you know demand cost or demand push, then you probably can figure out cost push. Cost push is where resource costs, if I look back here, resource costs would flip up really high and that would flip down really low. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take that curve and we're going to shift it backwards somewhere like this. Okay, my lines are not perfect, but you get the idea. Okay. All right, so there's a shift backward in the curve. Now, I've just kind of zipped through this. I hope that you guys can see that's going to cause a higher price level. That's also going to cause a fall in real GDP. So you have here a picture of stagflation that's really, really hard to fix. So we want to watch out for that, okay? New technology, better education, increased productivity. All right, this is going to be an increase because of that P rising. We can say AS is rising. All right, so what do we got to do? I'm going to put a line there, right? I'm going to put a line there. And I'm going to put a line there, okay? All right, so that gives me an idea there. A new president makes consumers and businesses more confident about the future economy. People will spend more. So that's going to show up as an AD shift, right? By now, if you know your 3 reasons why things shift, then you should be okay. Number 8, with the unemployment rate at 5%, the federal government reduces personal taxes and increases government spending. Okay, let's think about that now. We go over here. It's going to be more of this, right? Okay, there we go. So more government spending, more consumption, increase in AD. All right, let's take a look and see what that looks like. Bam. Wait a minute. This didn't fix any problems, did it? Okay. And you got to understand sometimes government officials do some silly things that have negative impacts for the economy. Follow your model. It's not going to lie to you. So stick with that increase in AD to see. All we got out of this was higher prices, right, guys? No more output. We're in the vertical range of inflation. This was a silly, silly, silly thing. Now, let me tell you, this is typically the response we get for any kind of crisis, like what we're seeing right now with the stimulus package for coronavirus. If the economy is already at a high level of output, you're going to get exactly this right here. So we will see. I'm hoping that this is a little bit lower and that this is actually going to pull us back into range 2. But we don't always need to do this, right? This is an easier political platform to run on, lower taxes, more spending. But sometimes we need to go the other direction, increase taxes and cut spending in order to get out of this range. So that's your economic connection to politics for the day. I'm going to move on. All right. All right, guys. So we are back and looking at this graph. It's basically the same creature. You have to draw your picture first and then just move down the page, talking about whether things moved or shifted and what happened to price level, output, and unemployment. Okay. So I'm going to do the highlighter. We're going to do this super quick. Increase in labor productivity. That's a dead giveaway. You now know productivity's here. That's going to be an increase. Let's move on, right? There's going to be an increase in AS, right? Pardon me. That's going to leave our AD curve just there as a movement. The reason we're saying movement, guys, is the intersection of the two. If AD is not shifting, then this is going to show up. The intersection between them two is just a movement down the curve. But for AS, we're going to have a dramatic shift, right? So that will be forward. That's going to do what? That's going to increase national output. It's going to lower the price level. And shouldn't it lower unemployment if we take that curve and shift it forward? I think so. If we're moving to the right, that means that unemployment's going to be falling. Okay, so there are your answers for that one. Increase in the price of inputs used by many firms. Well, that is going to be the opposite of this, right? Increase in resource costs, decrease in AS. So now we need a curve that's somewhere like up here. All right. That means AD curve still moving. AS curve is shifting. Real national output now is going to decrease. Price level is going to rise and unemployment's going to rise. So that is stagflation again. We don't like that. Boom in investment spending, assuming some unemployed resources are available. Guys, that last phrase right there tells you you've got some room to grow in range 2 without popping over into range 3 where there's a lot of inflation. Okay, so now we have an AD shift. We have an AS movement. Real national output is going to increase, price level increase, unemployment decrease. Okay. And then back to the last one, major reduction in investment spending. Investment, remember, is business spending. So if that's a decrease arrow, that's got to be a decrease arrow. So we now know we have a decrease in AD. Okay, AD is going to shift. AS is movement. Real national output drops, price level drops, unemployment spikes. Okay. So with that, I think we've gone over just about everything in the homework. You probably, I hope by now, should have a better grasp of what's going on. Let's just make sure that you keep up with that cheat sheet as you go into the quiz. And what you'll be doing is annotating on your Google Slides, very much like you did for homework. So I'll give you more instruction when you're ready to take your quiz. Thanks a lot.